Welcome to the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. I would like to remind everyone that if you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the chat box. If you're joining us by phone, please email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Dr. Serena Goldstein, ND. Dr. Serena is a naturopathic doctor who specializes in hormonal imbalance, weight concerns, and skin conditions. She uses nutrition, botanical medicine, and homeopathy to treat and discover the underlying cause of disease. Dr. Serena has her own practice in New York City and has been published in well-known health and wellness websites. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Serena, and let's get started.
All right, thank you so much for having me. All right, so I'm here to talk about how to boost your mental clarity by balancing hormones. So first, I just like to start off with some basic anatomy and physiology. So we'll take a look at the brain here. So right on top is the cerebrum, and that's going to house the amygdala. So the amygdala is really important in everything because that's great for emotions. And it's also our emotional behavior and motivation and why we're afraid of things outside of our control. So ultimately our fear. The hippocampus is responsible for processing long-term memory and emotional responses. Then we have the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So we could see here's where it's pointing to the hypothalamus, and the pituitary is hanging down under there. And the hypothalamus is responsible for hunger and thirst and body temperature. And then it also quote unquote talks a lot to the pituitary, which is the master gland that controls all other endocrine glands in the body and is a key role in connecting our endocrine system and our nervous system. Then right here we have the cerebellum, and that's important for just our perception and our movements. And then we have the brain stem, which is this elongated piece here, which eventually connects to our spinal cord. So the brain stem is great for breathing, heart rate, in other words, functions that we really need. And what's cool is when we look at these different connections of the body, as it elongates through the spinal cord, the nerves that come out attach into organs. So already we see how the brain is connecting with the other organs of our body. Then we have the hormones. So the HP right here, both of those stand for the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And then the A stands for the adrenal glands, which are like two triangular glands right on top of the kidney. So right in the center of them is the adrenal medulla. So that secretes adrenaline or epinephrine. And then that's going to be our immediate stress response, because going back to the primal days, ultimately when we have fear, we want to mobilize ourselves. So that's the role of adrenaline. And then coming outside, we have the adrenal cortex. So that's more the outside. And then the top layer is our mineralocorticoids, and that's going to help control our fluid balance. And then right underneath is our cortisol. So that's what everyone really thinks of when, oh, there's stress. We don't want to be stressed. Our cortisol is too high, or maybe it's too low. And so that's part of the middle piece of the adrenal cortex. And then right underneath are the sex hormones. So like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and that's what tends to take over as women enter into menopause. But, the kicker with the stress is that we also need it to live. So it's not just about mitigating it or bringing it up, but it's about how it can work in balance with the body. So ultimately, the amygdala recognizes our threat, tells our hypothalamus to secrete a certain hormone that tells our pituitary to secrete another hormone that finally talks to our adrenal glands to secrete cortisol. And that takes over after adrenaline is starting to come down. So that's part of one of the pieces to the HPA axis. The HPG axis are the gonads, and those are the ovaries in women and testes in the male. So those are part of our reproductive organs. And then we have the gut, which we see right here. There's almost 30 feet of intestines. And the GI is literally central to our medicine. If we can't absorb the proper nutrients, we're not going to be able to really, even as healthy as we're eating, what if we're not able to really get what we need to make all the hormones and the neurotransmitters and everything that we need to survive? So as we eat our food here, it goes down the esophagus into our stomach. We have our small intestine, so everything's getting absorbed and moved around. Then right here is where our large intestine begins. So we have the appendix sticking out. Then we have the ascending colon, the transverse, and then the descending down to our anus. And then some accessory glands that are, see, the pancreas is to the upper left, and that's great for helping us get sugar into the body, and then also helping us digest fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And then this huge organ right here is the liver, and that's one of our major detoxification organs in the body amongst many other functions, one of the most underrated organs. And right underneath, which we can't really see in this picture because it's located about here, is called the gallbladder, and that holds bile. So when we have fats, it helps our body just emulsify them and further digest them in the small intestine. All right, so defining mental clarity. These definitions here really just talk about our state of mental health and mental well-being. Can we function in society? Can we make decisions that aren't, to one extreme or the other? Do we have the mental capacity to really be able to think clearly through something? However, none of them acknowledge the mind-body connection, and which we already realized is already present because of all the nerves coming from the spinal cord connecting to our various organs. So here's our mind-body connection. Once again, let's say we feel a strong emotion, we may feel chest pain or an inability to breathe from a shock or a grief. Or whether we're doing a presentation such as now, or maybe anticipating a first date, maybe someone we hadn't seen in a long time, the discomfort, even if we're excited or anxious, those so-called butterflies in our stomach may have started from all the different thoughts in our head. Okay. All right, so everyone's favorite, or as we all talk about, stress. So as mentioned, adrenaline and noradrenaline are part of the adrenal medulla and the acute stress response. And then as those tend to decrease, cortisol takes over. So if adrenaline and noradrenaline get us mobilized, it's cortisol that's going to go fight or flight. We're going to be running from that bear. And then while we're running, we're not going to think about, well, do we need to reproduce? Do we need to digest? Our body is going to prioritize where blood flow and energy and nutrition is going to be going. Another popular term that we hear is adrenal fatigue. So that's chronic stress. So even in our most zen moments, if we still have imbalances in general going on in the body, then it's still going to have our body work harder in general, even if we're, as I said, at our most zen. So cortisol is generally highest in the morning, and then it decreases throughout the day, because as cortisol is high, it also suppresses certain hormones. So as it drops, one of them is melatonin that shoots up, and that's what helps us go to sleep. And then sleeping is really important to help repair and regenerate these hormones. And then as it decreases, usually by sunlight or as we're waking up in the morning, that's when cortisol rises again. So we need it to survive, and it's all about being in balance and in rhythm. Okay. All right, so now I'll get into some of the other cycles in our body, which is our reproductive health. So we'll see right here, it's the endometrial cycle. So this is when we get our period and the uterus shedding the inner lining. And then we also see that estrogen and FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, is starting to increase in the first half. So when we have when there's a drop of estrogen and progesterone right at the end of our period, that's when the cycle goes back up to the hypothalamus, tells it to release something called gonadotropin releasing hormone, tells the anterior pituitary to secrete LH, or luteinizing hormone, and FSH. And then from there, follicle stimulating hormone tells estrogen, to be secreted from the dominant follicle because we have all these eggs in our ovaries. So eventually, one of them out of the hundreds of thousands are going to mature. So then we watch here over the ovarian cycle the maturity of that particular egg. So now estrogen is starting to rise. It's continuing to feed back the follicle stimulating hormone. And then with our endometrium, we see that starting to thicken. Eventually, it gets to the point that the egg is mature. It bursts from the ovary, and so sometimes we'll feel a little twinge right around ovulation. And then in the fallopian tubes, which are kind of coming right by the ovary and extending out from the uterus, kind of help take up the egg, and then the egg eventually travels through the fallopian tubes and get implanted in the uterus. And it's luteinizing hormone that helps with that burst. Well, eventually, as after we ovulate, then the egg kind of folds in and it becomes the corpus luteum, and that's where we see this rise of progesterone. And as we have this huge increase of progesterone, estrogen is kind of present, but certainly not to the same extent. Our endometrium starting to grow because all of a sudden, all our body wants to do is we're going to make a baby, and it has to prepare the uterus in order for the egg to implant, anticipating the sperm. And then if not, eventually the endometrium turns into our period. But if there is sperm and it does implant, then there's another hormone that shoots up, and then progesterone also stays upwards as well to help the lining maintain its form. And testosterone is not listed here, however, also important in women, but it does tend to stay pretty constant. It doesn't, fluctuate very much with our cycles. And so, how is this important to our mental health? Well, we hear something called estrogen dominance, and actually, a lot of those symptoms could be similar to hypothyroid. And the problem is that when a lot of these hormones are off balance, estrogen, it puts our rose-colored glasses on, it suppresses our appetite, we have better social skills, communication, observation. It increases women's ability to feel more gut sensations than men, so we have just better gut instinct, which, sometimes I feel like we tend to in general. And then at the same time, progesterone, which is connected to a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is like our universal inhibitor to help calm us down. Well, wouldn't we want more mental clarity and then more progesterone so then we could be calm and cool and collected? The only problem is when they're out of balance, or when there's too much estrogen, and then that could actually start stimulating mood swings. The other problem is that too much estrogen also binds something called thyroid-binding globulin in the bloodstream, so it makes it less available to thyroid hormone, and thyroid is very important for weight and metabolism. So we see with these imbalances that it's about having it in the right form at the right time. And it's hard because we have 4 different hormones going on at any given time. And in addition, too much progesterone could also make us really moody. All right, so now we're going to start talking about the gut, which, once again, if we're not absorbing the proper nutrients that we need, assuming we're eating a so-called healthy diet, then we're not going to be even making these hormones. Or what if we're constipated and we can't poop? So that means we may have toxins recirculating. And these toxins may also cloud our judgment and whack out our hormones and further contribute to any dysbiosis. And as mentioned, the pancreas does secrete enzymes that help us digest all these nutrients. And as the nutrients are going through the gut, through all our intestines, we also need to make sure those tight junctions, which helps comprise the gut or the stomach, are tight, because if food falls through, that's actually one thought of why autoimmune disease develops, is because these food particles are now far into the body. So we have 4 pounds of gut bacteria, very important to, once again, to have that balance. We hear of H. pylori and candida and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, but the thing is, those microbes were there. The problem is when they became out of balance. Right. And then, as I mentioned, the liver, which is also incredibly important to detoxification, the same thing. If we have these toxic particles, circulating in our body or toxic chemicals, then we're also not going to be able to think clearly, and it's going to affect other parts of our physiology. So the liver is also the biggest converter from T4 to T3. So the thyroid, in addition to metabolism and weight loss, metabolism also includes our GI health and how fast our body can literally mobilize. Think of, whether it's going to the bathroom or being able to run from the bear, how fast can it get its resources? And then, if the different phases of detoxification are compromised in the liver, then we may have what could be are called so-called Frankenhormones. So these are when hormones haven't fully been digested, and now they're still circulating throughout our body. And same thing, our body just doesn't recognize them, doesn't know what to do with them. So it's more inflammation, more stress on the body. Okay. And sleep is so important. And I wish everyone, myself included, could be that leopard on a tree. What makes it, what I think, that leopard really lucky too, is that it gets to be in the middle of nature. I'd love to be out on a hot summer day sleeping in a tree. So they're probably taking an afternoon nap. But either way, they're relaxing, they're regenerating. Maybe he had a really tough kill earlier that day. But in general, our cycle, melatonin does get higher at night. So typically between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. is the best time for it to get regenerated. And so going to bed, especially after those times, we're just not going to be making as much melatonin as our body can really make. And it's also our most potent antioxidant, which also means great for liver health, great for clearing toxins. And it's also mostly derived from serotonin, which is our so-called happy hormone. And a lot of it is made in the gut. And it's the melatonin that's also made in the pineal gland and other organs. But when we look at gut health and how our body's interconnected, if most of our serotonin is made in the gut and our gut health is not where we believe it should be, then we may not be making as much melatonin as we really can either. Okay. So how can we find our natural rhythm? So the problem with general stress on the body is that it also enhances our fear response. It also suppresses our hippocampus. So, it puts a damper on our long-term memory and how we're able to remember things whether it's going through meetings, talking with friends. So, it's great we remember why we're scared, but if we can't remember what we did about it or in our normal day-to-day life, whether it's going through a certain event, being able to really calm ourselves down and take some deep breaths, we're just not going to be at our best. So the more we can look at all these organ systems as one big unit, and it's working from multiple angles. So as I mentioned, it's our adrenal health, how we could have balanced hormones, while sleep, is doesn't seem to be directly related. It still involves cortisol. It still involves our sex hormones. And we're also just looking at a benefit of more energy and concentration. The less our body has to do in healing other pieces, the more it can really elevate us and take us to that next level of health. So how can you achieve clarity? All right. So we all have our main concerns. Sometimes I don't see people until there are actually symptoms. So things may have been going on a long time, but they've been able to manage them. And other times we also may feel what can be normal isn't really normal. PMS, how many, even back in the day, how many of us are like taking Midol off the shelf? Or we have a pain, have some ibuprofen for cramps is what I hear a lot. And, we shouldn't have menopause, or all the symptoms associated with it. Menopause, yes, the symptoms, no. So this is all about being in balance. So we'll take that one main concern, even if it's just, I just want to be healthier. what's your next step? Because there's always going to be a next step. And that's maximizing our multiple lifestyle changes and therapies for efficiency. So let's say knowing how to rotate out supplements, when we can perhaps start adding in food again, if say we have certain allergens or gut problems with them. And then getting to the root cause of how and why everything started in the first place. Because if you have a roof, it works, there's some leaks, you can patch it up and you can keep patching it, but you're not changing the integrity of the roof. Maybe it's putting a whole new roof on there altogether. Or maybe it's somehow doing something to the material of the roof that will ultimately make it stronger so you won't have to continue patching it and palliating whatever symptoms arise. And this is a common one that I also hear, that there's so much information for supplements, but they don't really work. So a lot of what I see is sometimes the doses aren't sufficient. There's also different forms. For example, there's 3 forms of magnesium, if and then sometimes they're combined with other forms, so there could be more. The time frame. I hate to break it, but there's no magic bullet. I can get you feeling better, sure. But my interest too is also the trajectory of health. And then absorption. So if we're not absorbing things properly, we could also be taking all the supplements we want, but still may not be benefiting from them. And supplements are still supplements, which means they supplement a good, healthy diet and lifestyle. Not your standard American. You could, take your multivitamin and, then you're also eating, McDonald's every day, and not the McDonald's where they're touting the salads, but, so these are going to help with where you're at. And, and even though you may be targeting what could be a certain symptom, maybe it's something more. And that's something we look into as well. And it's, of course, like this world we live in, especially being in the middle of Manhattan, we want something quick and easy. And as I said, it's possible, but by looking and healing the bigger picture, the changes are going to be a lot more sustainable. All right, so what can you do? So I know we've talked a bit about stress and how it could impact our hormonal health, our general health concerns, and even our mental health and how much we remember. So really having to be able to calm down, such as gentle walking, yoga, meditation, even just taking 10 minutes of deep breathing a day where you're truly envisioning the breath, filling up your lungs, expanding your diaphragm, and just really allowing your body to feel calm. And what's cool is that one of the nerves that come off the brain stem is that it connects to the diaphragm. So even just by deep breathing, the slow movement of the diaphragm is already signaling our brain to calm down. And so ultimately this can lower cortisol, improve sleep, which is also going to improve memory when we wake up feeling sharp and energetic. And yeah, lose weight, because now we actually have we're getting a good rhythm of cortisol in there. Seed cycling is one of my favorite modalities, and that's eating certain seeds and having certain oils at 2 different times of the month to support hormone production. Staying hydrated, I mean, this is something we could do for the rest of our lives. For example, our brain is 75% water and our body is 60 to 70%. We're secreting, every day, whether it's from going to the bathroom, crying, sweating if we work out, but even if we don't work out, maybe a brisk walk and you're breaking a sweat. So we always need to be replenishing. And then filling half of our plate with vegetables, and then also enjoying healthy fats like avocados, coconut oil, olive oil. So what these fats do is that they also help fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K have better absorption. And the Whole30.com I find is a wonderful resource. And while it's paleo-based, so that means it's grain-free and dairy-free, there's also vegetarian options, but they have wonderful shopping lists and recipes, very easy to navigate, and also very informative. Another common issue, especially in women that I see, is what we put on our skin. So even if we're having this incredibly clean diet, taking the right supplements, our skin is our largest organ. And so it's going to absorb a lot, even what's out in the environment. So if we're also putting creams on there that are going to disrupt our hormones, tax our liver, then we're only going to be, we're not going to be making the progress that we desire. So ewg.org/skin deep, if any of your products, so you could enter, they have thousands and thousands of products. If any of the things you're using are more than 4, throw it out. Okay, so supplements. Vitamin D, that seems to be, also another popular one. Definitely have your levels first checked by your doctor. There's a big range, but it's also possible to have a toxic level as well. And, depending on where you are health-wise, they may have different ideal ranges. But vitamin D is wonderful for mood, memory, weight, even. It helps with calcium and phosphorus absorption, which is great for bone health. And it also helps lower estrogen and testosterone. So where there's a lot of estrogen dominance, especially what we'll find in plastic bottles and even skincare products, this will help lower that as well. And then B vitamins, there's mostly a deficiency in elderly and vegans just because it does take a good amount of stomach acid to absorb. But ultimately, it's involved with over 500 reactions of the human body. So I have this little graph right here where you could take a look at all the different Bs. So because it's so helpful, like the production of neurotransmitters and hormones and detoxification, and the right form of it, which is usually in a complex, will help form choline, which I'll talk about a few stars down, and which is very important for memory. And then, as you can see, I also listed under here, you could even write these down, just some good foods that also include these nutrients. So omega-3 fatty acids, this same thing, this is a wonderful anti-inflammatory, great for, just really helping calm down any stressors on the body. So EPA is great for overall inflammation, such as joints. And then DHA is great for brain function, like brain cell communication, or, in our different neurotransmitters and nerves all talk to each other to tell us, all right, here's how we're going to go about that meeting, and here's how we're going to present ourselves. Curcumin is the most active ingredient in turmeric. You can see this bright orange root picture here of this wonderful herb. And it's antioxidant. It increased levels of serotonin, which once again is our happy hormone. And it also helps remove extra estrogen from the body. And ladies, if you're still having your periods, this is also great for period cramps. So it does so much for the body. It's really such a wonderful, I guess, overall herb, just like the omega-3 fatty acids and the B vitamins and vitamin D. Choline I put in is a little more specific because it really supports memory function, like how fast we think. And then it also doubles as being great for liver health, which once again, that's one of our biggest detoxification organs in the body. And then green tea, that the most popular component is ECGC, which can help improve cognitive functioning and reduce plaque formation in the brain, which is commonly seen with Alzheimer's. So it also is great for liver health, really helping bind up our hormones. It can relax you and boost brain power due to L-theanine, which is another wonderful neurotransmitter. However, because it does have caffeine, if you are someone who can be sensitive to caffeine, like, one zip and you're just plastered on the ceiling, or then you can't go to sleep at night. Certainly, there are a lot of other things that we can do to promote these same good feelings and good benefits. All right. So here are some great herbs. So rhodiola is great for low mental energy and overall performance. Holy basil, great for the adrenal glands, such as stress and sleep, and also anti-inflammatory. You can see I listed the pictures of the different herbs on the side. And then eleuthero is great if you also have a hard physical job, great for stamina and endurance. And Schisandra berry is great for working long hours and concentration, alertness, and memory. So, my takeaway messages from everything is that our physiology is always more complex than any sole organ system. So, yes, my favorite thing is to look at hormones. I love the way the body works, but I also love its interplay, like with our gut and our sleep and stress, and really understanding that big picture. And with the big picture, it allows me to get to the root cause of disease and channeling that inner 3-year-old that won't stop asking why. Because we always need to be thinking about where did the symptom come from? Maybe it was already there, but what happened, that why is our body now expressing it? What is going on? And I hope you learned some natural tips as well that can help reset your natural rhythm, and as well as just being able to promote clear thinking and memory. So I included my information down here. You could see my website and my email address, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Dr. Serena. That was really great.
Thank
I'd like
you.
I'd like to remind everyone that if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box or email info@savvyladies.org. And we had some questions that came in already, so I'll get started with the first one, which is, how do I know if my gut is healthy or affecting my mood and general health?
Yeah, great question. So, typical gut symptoms, and it doesn't have to be to one extreme or the other. Having proper bowel movement, so like having 2 to 3 normal brown bowel movements a day where you're not constipated or having diarrhea, and also being able to wear those same pants and button them, where you're not having any gas, bloating. Even there, I mean, there is a little bit that shifts around our period, but sometimes there's an overall fullness that we'll feel. Burping a little more frequently than we used to could also be indicative of something going on. Sugar cravings are certainly, can certainly mean an imbalance of gut bacteria, because if it's imbalanced, that means our gut is, literally telling us we want you to feed it. We know it's not the healthiest bacteria, but feed me sugar anyway. So those are some more gut related symptoms that may be indicative that there is something deeper going on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question that came in is, how can a young adult reduce fatty liver and gallstones if diagnosed?
All right, so once again, that would be the main complaint. And there's so going back to the slide that I had with with some of these supplements, these are all ultimately great for the liver as well. But as I said before, it's also working on diet and lifestyle. So things like alcohol is going to very negatively affect the liver, sugar, especially working on the blood sugar component. So there's certainly ways to improve this. The gallbladder is our bile flow, and the liver is what makes our bile to get into the gallbladder. And it's really, once again, taking that whole picture. So it's very much possible, but I still need to, really pull myself out of what are other things going on. So certainly starting with those supplements, and then limiting alcohol, and just really improving the vegetable intake are great places to start.
Okay, thanks. We had a question come in about seed cycling and wanting some more information on that. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm also glad to send out a handout as well, and also attach it to my website so you can read more. So seed cycling is the thought that certain seeds, so like chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, so having those ground 1 to 2 tablespoons per day, you put them in your smoothie, put them over a salad, put them over a meal like as a topping. And then fish oil, the first half of the month, that helps promote estrogen. And we also have different metabolites of estrogen, so those are going to give us the more beneficial forms. And then having those the first half of the month from the new moon to the full moon. So now we get to be in rhythm with literally the day, like day and night. And then the second half of our cycle from full moon to new moon is ground sesame or ground sunflower seeds and taking evening primrose oil. And those are thought to help support the production of progesterone. So that's where we use seed cycling as a way to both support the hormones, and then also, something like ground flax, for example, is also great in binding up excess hormones, and so we could excrete those.
Okay. And do you have time for one last question?
Yes, I do.
Okay. It's I'm interested in adding healthy natural foods and medicine to my lifestyle, but I worry that they're too expensive. Do you think that I can find these products at my local grocery store? And does buying healthy always have to mean it's expensive?
No, and that's a great question because price is always something too that's on everyone's mind, and I also get asked about a lot. So, if you've heard of the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, you could certainly Google that. I know ewg.org, they also have a great resource on there as well. So, when it comes to prioritizing, so say if we start with the foods first, those are foods that are the Dirty Dozen, and then I believe now they even added two more like kale and cucumber, and those are the foods that are the most contaminated. So if you need to prioritize which foods to buy organic, it's those which I think now are 14. And then the clean 15, those are a list of 15 foods that you could buy at the fruit stand that don't need to be bought organic. As far as supplements go, that's something I'm a bit pickier on because I also find a lot of supplements have fillers and food dyes in them that are actually doing much more harm than good, especially as an additive effect. And also something like fish oil, that's a supplement, for example, that I'm very much a stickler on of, if that's something to invest in versus something like vitamin D, um, which is a bit, like a lot of people produce. I'm more concerned about the fillers versus, let's say, fish oil. I want to know where the company has got their fish from. Is it a good ocean? What are their credentials? So, I mean, ultimately, it's all an investment, and we all choose to prioritize. Everyone has their, every professional has their different way of distributing supplements, and that's certainly a valid question to bring to whomever you see. Like, what are some supplements I can get, a little cheaper at my health food store versus what are ones that they probably have access to that will also be a lot more beneficial, because you don't want to waste your money on ones that you think kind of maybe sort of have a chance of working.
Okay. Well, I think we're about out of time for today. So I want to thank you again, Dr. Serena, for a really great and helpful presentation. I want to thank everyone who joined us today and asked some great questions. We hope that we'll see you again for future webinars. And thank you again so much, Dr. Serena.
All right, thank you again for having me.
Bye-bye.